I have owned and ridden motorcycles for 50 years. People own motorcycles for various reasons: to commute to work, to ride with the camaraderie of friends, to race or compete, or to tour, to mention a few. Throughout my years of riding, I have had one overriding reason to ride, and that is to have adventures. I've had no interest in riding big or fast bikes, racing, or having my bike as an identity, as some riders identify with the Harley bike culture. So, what is a motorcycle adventure? And do you need a purpose-built adventure motorcycle to have one? Here are my thoughts on this subject. The first motorcycle I owned was a late 1960s Honda Sport 50, a 50cc 4-speed bike delivering around 9 horsepower. On a good day, I could get this bike up to 45 miles an hour. I got the bike for free as it had been discarded by its previous owner. It did not run, but being a simple motorcycle, I made the necessary repairs and I was ready to ride. I had my thoughts on traveling and going on a camping adventure on this little bike. Well, I did go on a few camping trips with it. I took the minimum of camping gear, plastic tarp, sleeping bag mostly. This was my first adventure motorcycle, decades before BMW would build the first real adventure motorcycle. Throughout the years, I've owned other motorcycles, but my favorite was a 1972 Honda CL350 Scrambler. To me, this bike looked and acted like a motorcycle looking for adventure. It had a small but perky engine, wide scrambler handlebars, and an upswept exhaust system. I rode this bike on many overnight camping trips for almost 20 years. Then, about 20 years ago, I started to see funny-looking motorcycles configured with metal side cases and pointy front designs that did not look like your average street cruiser, nor like a dirt bike. I started to hear the term adventure motorcycle being used, and I said, wait, I already have a motorcycle that I ride on adventures, and it doesn't look like this at all. This is also when I realized that we, as motorcycle riders, have various ideas on what constitutes an adventure ride, and what motorcycle you need to accomplish that adventure. After all, people have been having adventures on motorcycles for almost 100 years. My idea of an adventure ride may differ from yours. I also realize this when I talk to riders in our adventure motorcycle community. Our expectations vary. So what is an adventure? To some riders, an adventure means chewing up miles of pavement at highway speeds to reach a destination many miles away, maybe with some twisty secondary roads, but avoiding all dirt and gravel roads if possible. I see this as adventure touring. Owners of street cruisers have been riding on these type of adventures for decades without the need to buy special purpose-built adventure motorcycles. Personally, I don't need heated grips, Bluetooth music feeds, or cruise control to have an adventure. But I understand for some riders, these comfort features are necessary accessories for their style of adventure riding. To some riders, an adventure ride is not an adventure unless you're traveling for multiple days, whether carrying camping gear or staying in hotels. The thought of an adventure ride is to travel beyond one's home turf. Some riders need to ride in groups to have an adventure for safety or companionship. For them, an adventure is to be shared. Other riders, like myself, prefer to ride alone and seek the solitude of exploring wild or remote areas. Some in the adventure riding community do not consider a ride an adventure ride unless it involves riding some or mostly off pavement. Most purpose-built adventure motorcycles have the capability to be ridden off the pavement. The BDRs, or backcountry discovery routes, were established to feed this kind of adventure. an adventure that combines riding on pavement, riding on dirt, and carrying camping gear for long distances and multiple nights. I believe this is the ultimate definition of what constitutes an adventure ride and what most motorcycle companies strive for in marketing their bikes. I have my own idea of what constitutes an adventure for me on a motorcycle. I like to explore. I am not as focused on my destination as I am on the journey to the destination. I have little interest in chewing up highway miles while passing sites by that I could explore. I'm also not interested in rugged off-road rides with the purpose of challenging my technical ability or to give me the whoops from riding fast on a dirt trail. I don't need to have a multi-day ride to have an adventure, although overnighters are one of the reasons that I ride. For me, adventures are often solitary and away from crowds. I seek lesser traveled roads, dirt and paved. I stop often to explore, and sometimes I combine rides with hikes at my destination. I stop often, which is more difficult to do in a group setting. I do not ride two up, and for me, the lighter the better. I am fortunate that I have many rides waiting to be explored close to my home, so I don't need an overly powerful motorcycle to get me to the start of my adventure. Which brings me to the topic of what constitutes an adventure motorcycle. Obviously, this varies on what you define as an adventure. It is generally recognized that BMW developed the first purpose-built adventure motorcycle in the 1980s with the release of the R80 GS. They have arguably been the leader in adventure motorcycles ever since. The modern adventure motorcycle differs from the other street or dirt motorcycles in a number of ways. Larger fuel tank to ride long distances in remote areas, longer travel suspension and clearance to ride over obstacles, a taller seat height with pegs designed for riding while standing, tires designed for riding on pavement and dirt, engines to push out sufficient low-speed torque to ride in challenging locations, and bags to carry luggage for multi-day adventures. I decided to purchase my first purpose-built adventure motorcycle in 2021 with the release in the United States of the Yamaha Tenere 700, a middleweight category motorcycle weighing around 450 pounds wet. On paper, it seemed to meet my needs for the type of adventure I would ride. I rode this bike into the Oregon Outback, on a BDR, and on many other adventures. The bike delivers more power than I needed, and I found myself struggling to be confident being able to control this top-heavy machine in all but the easiest of off-pavement rides. As I mostly ride alone, I decided it was becoming too much a risk for me to control this stallion, so I sold it after riding 6,500 miles. I wanted to keep riding on my style of adventure, and the manufacturers of adventure bikes, including the big boys like BMW and KTM, had recently released smaller beginner bikes as the adventure segment had been pushing out larger and larger capacity bikes in recent years. Many riders successfully ride their heavy BMW 1250 GS bikes on rough and rocky terrain over many miles on a BDR and go on epic long-distance rides across the continent on these large and heavy bikes. However, that is not me, and that is not the type of adventure I would be taking on my weekend travels. I've met riders who love their large capacity bikes. Some admit a bit of intrepidation about taking their bike off the pavement, even though that may have been their intent when they purchased the bike, and the bike certainly has the capability. We have all seen the jokes about the rider on a $20,000 adventure bike going to Starbucks as their adventure destination. I was a bit disappointed in the bikes being offered in the adventure riding segment, as the only small and light bikes I was seeing were mostly like dual sport bikes, such as the popular Honda CRF Rally. I considered buying a dual sport like the Kawasaki KLX 300 and modifying it as an adventure bike. But there were too many compromises for me, and the bike was a bit weak for any longer pavement rides. I enjoy watching other riders going on long adventures on small bikes. Itchy Boots is probably one of the most well-known travelers on a small bike. She's able to ride on varied terrain and cover 300 to 500 kilometers a day, which is all that I would seek on my rides as well. I have no desire to win the coveted Iron Butt Award for distance riding in a day. When the spoke wheel version of the KTM 390 Adventure was released in the US, I decided to have a look and a test ride. I was impressed with this small bike, and although I prefer the 21-inch, 18-inch wheel combo of my Tenere 700, I believed the KTM could hit my sweet spot for the type of adventures I was seeking, and I could have the confidence riding this bike alone through the wildlands. I had made the mistake of letting the specs and performance of the Tenere 700 define the adventure, when I should have thought more into what type of adventure I would be seeking with a bike. The moral to this story? Don't let the manufacturers or the YouTube expert riders, for that matter, define your idea of an adventure, especially as an older rider. I had great adventures on my old Honda CL350, and I hope to recreate that feeling on my new KTM 390 Adventure. I have only 1,200 miles and a single overnighter so far, but I am liking the feeling of this ride for my type of adventure. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Leave your comments below too on what constitutes an adventure motorcycle ride for yourself. And if you'd like, subscribe, and I will see you next time on one of my senior moments.